With COVID almost non-existent, something we're left wondering is the massive mental hole it has left us with, the hole being a preference for a state of social isolation. Hello, and welcome to another episode of What Makes Us Tick, a show where we talk about different social and technological phenomena in society. And for today's video, join us as we interview 3 individuals from the education industry in an effort to dissect the elusive phenomena known as post-COVID social anxiety. Social anxiety has been a part of humankind as long as evolution itself. Researchers believe it is a side effect of the way humans interact and operate in society, and funny enough, it can be inherited. As if working with regular anxiety was not hard enough, the emergence of COVID-19 seemed to have expedited its prevalence across different demographics, particularly the youth. Professor David Murphy, a lecturer at Simon Fraser University, speaks of a steady decline in student engagement after in-person classes were introduced in early 2022.
There's a lot of concessions that we've been giving. Certainly during COVID, there were concessions for work coming in late and so forth, or people not being able to show up on Zoom. And these concessions, I think, have been expected to continue. So we get a lot, and I hear this from my colleagues as well, a lot of concessions are being given for numerous reasons that is certainly greater than it was prior to COVID. So enrollment or attendance in class is one of the factors that has increased, or the lack of attendance in class has increased.
And rightfully so. Researchers in China found that participants in an experiment reported close to 50% more signs of mental illness, in contrast to times before COVID. Such trauma is assumed to cause long-term side effects. How does that translate to actual experiences? Mercedes Turner, a student at SFU, describes her transition as somewhat unnerving.
Since COVID and coming back into classes, it's been a little bit of a transition, which I wouldn't anticipate because before COVID, having in-person classes was the only type of way that I found that I could learn. And then when we went online, it was a really rough transition. I now, after COVID, I do prefer online learning because you can learn and be in class when you're at home, like wherever is most convenient. A big part of it was people they got used to not having to be around others. One, for that provided some sort of comfort for their own safety, but also I think it just helps with a lot of social anxiety. Classroom settings especially had a lot of little cues that inspired social anxiety, like putting your hands up, speaking up in person, and I think having online courses was a great way for people to kind of skip out on that.
There is hope, however. As recent experiments and research suggests, students are slowly recovering from mental ailments such as depression and anxiety.
And so if you're particularly interested in young adults, like students, I should mention, and importantly so, that they were one of the main risk profiles. And so it kind of counterintuitively, you might think, because older adults were at greater risk for actually catching COVID. Many of the mental health detriments were experienced at much higher rates of concern in younger adults. And I think it's hard to pull apart exactly what the reasons are because many of them co-occur. But I think these are times at which people tend to be particularly social in their lives, and closing down social events and opportunities is pretty consequential. I also think the future looked really grim, and that's, you have a long life ahead of you, but the next few years, if not longer, don't look so great. That's particularly challenging. And younger adults are often the ones who tend to work in more precarious employment, or like bars and restaurants, and those were some of the first things shut down. So I think there's a number of factors that influenced mental health. So while average rates seem to suggest it wasn't nearly as detrimental as we might expect, some of the hardest hit groups were younger adults. But I think the expectation was that it was going to be tragic and it was going to be extremely long-standing and devastating. And in fact, at least when we're looking at aggregate levels, like on average, it was surprisingly lower than expectations.
Professor Aknin also suggested ways to coping with this. Methods include challenging oneself to go out and interact with others, primarily because we as humans are hardwired to find pleasure in it. So, a bit of exposure goes a long way. Though this phenomena is still an ongoing investigation, the only thing we can do is rely on our ability to endure. the same as we have done through generations, especially through COVID. Lastly, we must realize everybody is moving at their own pace, and it is only human to respect that and give people space. Well, that's about it for this episode. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and don't forget to share. Until next time, where we figure out what makes us tick.